Yeah, the number one thing is the representation. So with lactation, so there's international, it's IBCLC, International Board Certified Lactation Consultants. So, they're the top of the top. There's 20,000, or a little over 20,000 in the United States, and only 2% are Black. That's a daunting number.
Hmm.
2% are Black.
This is more than our first episode. It's the very first heartbeat of She's in Session, a space where bold truth meets deep healing, where we challenge what holds us back and build what we carry us forward. Here, we rise together, women, families, and communities, ready to speak, heal, and grow. Welcome to the beginning of something bigger than us all. This week, we're holding space for the powerful, yet often unseen journey of breastfeeding in communities of color. From cultural expectations to the emotional weight of feeding and mothering, this episode explores the deep connection between milk and mental health for BIPOC moms. Tune in for an honest conversation on nourishment, identity, and care for both baby and mama. You made it. Take a seat. Take a deep breath. Let's step into this moment with intention. I'm your host, Selah, a wife learning to love with intention, a mama growing through grace, and a therapist walking others towards healing and wholeness. This is a space where we breathe deep, unpack gently, and rise with purpose. Before we dive in, I want to set the tone for today's conversation. We're talking about a journey that stretches from the wisdom of our grandmothers to the weight we carry as mothers today. A story woven through our bodies, our culture, and our mental health. This is From Ancestral Strength to Modern Challenges: Milk, Mamahood, Breastfeeding, and Mental Health for BIPOC Moms. August is National Breastfeeding Month, and we're leaning into it with all the honesty, love, and truth this moment deserves. Because this journey of breastfeeding is not just about latching or ounces, it's about survival and sacrifice, identity and pressure, healing and hope. And for Black and Brown mothers, this journey is layered. It's physical, yes, but it's also emotional, spiritual, cultural, and often invisible. Breastfeeding becomes a mirror, a reflection of how supported we feel, how connected we are to our bodies, and how much space we're allowed to take up in a system that too often overlooks our pain and our power. Today, we're reclaiming that space. We're honoring the sacred, and we're saying, Mama, you matter. Not just as a vessel of nourishment, but as a whole, worthy woman who deserves care, compassion, and community too. I'm so honored to be joined by Arija Pua, a certified breastfeeding specialist, birth doula, and doula trainer, whose work, wisdom, and walk bring so much light to this space. She doesn't know just the facts, she knows the feelings, and today we're going to get there together. Arija is a Langston University counseling graduate of May 2025. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Certified breastfeeding specialist, birth doula, doula trainer. She has personally experienced hospital, birth center, and home births, assisted and unassisted. Since 2017, she has supported women and families by providing the education and resources needing to understand factors for a healthy pregnancy, the many nuances of labor and delivery, postpartum recovery, and a successful breastfeeding relationship. Arija is currently pursuing LPC licensure, and
Yeah.
perinatal mental health certification, with a specific emphasis on the distinctive challenges encountered by Black women who are disproportionately impacted by maternal mental health concerns. She aims to not only empower women with the knowledge and resources they need to navigate their health journeys, but also educate fellow birth workers and health professionals that support Black women through reproductive care. Welcome to She's in
Thank you. Thank you.
Session.
I'm excited to be here.
Welcome. We're definitely excited. Definitely needed.
Thank
Definitely
you. Thank
needed
you.
in
Yeah,
our
I'm glad to be
community.
here. And I'm glad to be your first guest.
Yes, definitely. So let's dive into it. This is the first segment, the roots of nourishment. So before we
Yes.
unpack, let's take a step back and honor the beginning, because every story has roots, and sometimes what we saw or didn't see growing up shaped how we showed up in our motherhood, right?
Yes.
So what first introduced you to breastfeeding, whether through your own experience, your family history, or your professional journey?
So I actually do not remember seeing a whole lot of breastfeeding like growing up. I think my younger sisters were breastfed for a little while. And I mean, I literally cannot tell you why I started breastfeeding or how. I just knew that that was something that like I had to do over time. With each child, and I have seven, so they were all breastfed, each a little longer than the other. So over time, I learned different things. I gained more education. But yeah, like I just knew that that was what I had to do. And so I did it. I would say not very successfully in the beginning, but again, with each child, it got quote unquote easier. And yeah, I was able to breastfeed them longer and longer.
Were you mentally or emotionally prepared for that and what it,
Heck
it
no.
demanded?
No.
Yeah, I don't think many
So
of
with
us
the
were.
first one, yeah, so with the first one, she's 18 now. After the first couple of weeks, I became like so engorged and I was like, what is going on? And I can't do this. One of my friends came over and she literally helped me. She
Right.
like was hand expressing me. She was like, this is how you do it. She was like, what have you been doing? And I'm like, I don't know, nothing. And so I literally was not mentally prepared for that aspect of it, of being engorged, like having way too much milk, the pain, all that stuff. And then as time went on, I still wasn't prepared for number two to be stuck to me all the time. I was like, why is this kid 6 months and still nursing every 2 hours? I went to the doctor, the pediatrician. He was like, yeah, this is normal. And I'm like, no, it's not. He was like, yes, it is. And come to find out, like, yes, it was normal for, a breastfed baby to nurse every, 2 hours. But I was not prepared for that. I'm like, I have things to do. Like, I can't be sitting down feeding this kid every, 2 hours. Like, can we stretch it to three, maybe, to four? But not every 2 hours. And yeah, I was not prepared with those first two whatsoever to breastfeed. But then by the third, I don't know, just something clicked. I was like, the first two, didn't go as well. And then even like with the pregnancies, and the delivery. They were both born in the hospital. They were both slightly traumatic. And I was like, this has to be different. Like, I can't go through that same thing again with the deliveries, with the pregnancies, with the breastfeeding. Something has to change. And so that's when I started looking, more into educating myself on breastfeeding, the things that were normal, how to avoid, some of those challenges, even with the pregnancy, just researching, a different way to birth. There was always this desire to do a water birth. And with the first two, I was like, this is really not possible for me. Had never even looked into it to know whether or not it's possible. I was just like, yeah, it's not going to happen. But with that third one, I was like, oh no, it's happening. It's happening. So we did a birth and a birth, water birth. I breastfed her for almost 2 years. And yeah, from there, I was like, oh, like, this is how it's going to be from now on. But yeah, initially, definitely not prepared.
Those experiences that you just mentioned, going from the beginning of, okay, what's going on with my body? Is this normal? Is it
Yes.
not? Having that fear. And many of moms, I experienced it the first time when I was pregnant with my baby. I was like, okay, I'm not producing enough. And we're going to go into it
Yeah,
later
yeah.
on too. Many moms give up early on too.
Yes. Yes, very early on, yes.
Is having to really get, like you said, the education piece that's so necessary for us,
Right.
which brings me to something
Yeah.
that can either nourish or deplete that part of breastfeeding, which is our mental health, which brings me to the next, mental health and milk supply. Let's talk about something that doesn't always make it into postpartum pamphlets, which is our mind, right? Because when a mama
Yes.
is anxious, exhausted, or triggered, her body knows it, and so does her baby. So,
Yes.
have you seen mental health, whether it's postpartum, anxiety, depression, or unhealed trauma, impact a mama's ability to breastfeed or bond?
Yeah, so, pregnancy, delivery, postpartum, adjusting to, having a new baby, and then adjusting to motherhood. So some, have a baby, they already have other children, already difficult. And then you want to add breastfeeding to that.
Mhm.
It can be very challenging, very discouraging. It definitely, can affect the bond, with the baby. It can affect the breastfeeding. It's definitely a lot to take on and to take in. And it's especially for us, as Black and brown women, there's so many other things, that are stacked on top of all those, situations. And we're dealing, with systemic racism. We're dealing with providers who, don't listen to us. We're, dealing with family members who might not even understand either what's going on, the birth plans that we had, the breastfeeding plans that we have. It can be overwhelming for sure. But what's interesting is now we have so many more like support groups. There's, many more women who are breastfeeding who can, offer support, offer, a lending hand like my friend did. She came over and she was like, girl, what are you doing? This is what you need to be doing. So there, there's more of that. There's more community, especially, with breastfeeding. So I encourage anybody, take advantage. Take a breastfeeding class, get your support circle together, your village, anybody who's breastfed and can, really help you along the way will make a huge, huge difference.
Definitely. And you basically answered what I was going to ask. What are other ways that we
Yeah.
can support moms during this breastfeeding journey? I know you mentioned some like support groups. What are some other ways we can offer that support?
Absolutely. So the very first thing is to make sure mama goes to a breastfeeding class because she's going to learn so much there. And so that's the first step. And with anything like education and preparation are key. When it comes to, pregnancy, a healthy pregnancy, you got to, be prepared. Nutrition, exercise, the right provider, all those things. You're typically preparing, for that aspect. When it comes to breastfeeding, it's the same thing. What, the education, how does this work? What are things I need to do or things I need to avoid? Who are the professionals that I would go to and talk to, if I do have a problem? It's all in the education and the preparation initially, but then there is a saying that breastfeeding is 10% supply and 90% determination. So most women do not have an issue with their supply. If can be a perceived issue of low supply. It's typically the determination aspect. If you're determined to breastfeed, you're going to breastfeed. And so understanding that a mom that's struggling and has reached out for help, she probably is determined to breastfeed. So where's the support in helping her, along the way? Not throwing formula into the picture, which a lot of providers do because they're typically not trained in breastfeeding. So their response to a breastfeeding issue is to give, formula or a bottle, but making sure that she has the right support, the right resources to continue with that journey.
Generational and cultural pressures. For many of us, we're not just feeding our babies, we're confronting legacies, whether it's
Hmm.
silent strength, suppressed struggles, or cultural pressure to just do it. So much of us we carry isn't
Yeah.
ours alone. What are some of the cultural or generational expectations that show up for Black and Brown mothers about around breastfeeding?
Yeah, so first I would say that historically there hasn't really been a expectation for breastfeeding. So, we started feeding our own, then, through slavery we became, wet nurses, and then there was really this shift away from, our own children and taking care of our own children. And it just kind of, exacerbated into this crazy thing of, pushing formula onto black women. And before it was like, if a black woman was breastfeeding, she was considered poor because she couldn't afford formula. And so then it's like, well, I don't, want to, be portrayed or perceived as poor. So, I'm going to, formula feed. But even like in the hospital systems, they're pushing formula, on moms. But luckily, again, like, we've come a long way. So there are way more, women, black and brown women breastfeeding now. But one thing that does happen as well is that, the older family members who are, not really knowledgeable about breastfeeding, they're, pushing those myths of, if the baby's crying, the baby's still hungry, or if the baby's nursing a lot, the baby's still hungry. And so then they're trying to introduce solids and things like that, or, just give the baby, a bottle of formula, which really undermines the whole breastfeeding journey, as well. So it's really good if not only the support person, but maybe even, older family members can attend a breastfeeding class with with the woman, so that they're educated as well. But for sure that woman is advocating for herself and, she is using that knowledge to educate her family members as well.
How can we start rewriting those stories with truth and tenderness? You pretty much explained some, right? With those
Yeah.
education classes, even including the older generation to come back into our roots of breastfeeding.
Yeah, you have a, positive breastfeeding story, share it. Definitely share
Mhm.
it. Talk about it, make sure your family knows, well, maybe when I started, like I said, I think I breastfed my daughter for like 5 months, then my son for 6 months. And then by number three, it was almost 2 years. So, sharing those things with families so they understand, like, yes, this is a long term, can be a long term. It's not, a 5 or 6 month journey for a lot of women. They want to breastfeed as long as possible. So, the more that they hear those stories, the more that, you can educate and inform, the better.
But even all the inner work, the truth is the system still cracks that too many mamas fall through, which
Yeah.
goes into the support gaps in the system. Let's name what so many of us already know deep down. You can be informed, you can be ready, you can have every intention to breastfeed, but still fall through the cracks. What
Yeah.
disparities do you see in the lactation maternal health care system, especially for women of color?
Yeah. The number one thing is the representation. So with lactation, so there's international, it's IBCLC, International Board Certified Lactation Consultants. So, they're the top of the top. There's 20,000, or a little over 20,000 in the United States, and only 2% are Black. That's a daunting number.
Mhm.
2% are Black. So if I'm struggling, if I was like, yeah, I really want to breastfeed, but I'm struggling, I don't know who to turn to for help. 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to find somebody that looks like me to help me, which there are other trained, professionals, but if someone looks like me, then they know the struggle that I've gone through outside of breastfeeding, just in life general, the stressors of life. They know what challenges I face. They know the struggles that come with breastfeeding as a woman of color, different conditions that can happen to women of color specifically. Like they're trained in that area, not just the lactation. So that's the number one disparity is just not having enough people who look like us when we're trying to get help.
What would it look like to create a system, if we could, that truly sees, supports, and serves us?
For one, an increase in breastfeeding success for sure. More women being able to reach out and get help and just feeling comfortable and trusting their provider to tell them what's going on and then, get that support that they need. But definitely an increase in the support and the success rates for breastfeeding. Because I think it's about like 50 to 60% of Black women start off exclusively breastfeeding. And by the time the baby is 4 months old, I think it was, those numbers decrease like all the way down to like 20%, if that. And so there's a huge decrease because they're not getting the help that they need or their providers are not knowledgeable. They're giving them incorrect information. They're pushing that formula. The family members don't even know how to help, or they're saying, again, give the baby some food, give the baby a bottle, the rice cereal, all those things that a baby does not need, slowly decreasing between birth and then around the 4 month mark.
You're right. I've had clients had in their mind, okay, I want to try breastfeeding, but then it goes into doctor said, oh, you're not producing enough. You have to supplement with this and
Yeah.
this, or even family members putting
Yeah.
their 2 cents of like, no, 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 you need to give this because they're not eating enough.
And even in the hospital. So I've had so many clients who they gave birth in the hospital. A lactation professional did not come to the room, or whoever showed up just kind of popped their head in and said, "Hey, I hear you're having some issues. Here's a nipple shield," and then they're gone. So they have not actually sat down. They haven't talked to the mom. They haven't gone through what's actually happening, what's wrong. Helping them with position, with latch. None of those things are happening. And so they're just kind of left to fend for themselves with a nipple shield that they should have never gotten in the first place. And then it just kind of goes downhill from there for a lot of women.
Even then, those who are supposed to be helping, they're
Right.
failing. They're failing us.
That are getting paid to help, not helping. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. While we're fighting for those systems to change, some mamas are holding on by only one, maybe one thing, their faith. So, faith healing and the feeding season. So, now let's shift for a moment from the physical to the spiritual, because when you're up at 3 a.m., tears in your eyes, trying to hold it
Yes.
all together, sometimes you don't need a how to, you just need a word.
Yes.
So, have you seen faith serve as a lifeline in the feeding season for the moms who are spiritually worn out but still pouring from an empty cup?
Yeah, it was me. It was me recently with the last one. Like just being just fatigued, tired. Again, I have seven. I just turned 40 last year, about to turn 41, working full time. I was in school full time. It was a lot, like trying to manage it all. And, having to, roll over and feed a baby or, feed a baby multiple times, throughout the day when and I wasn't even working at this time. I was on maternity leave, but just thinking about, oh my gosh, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have to go back to work. That in itself is also, mentally draining because I want to go back to work. I want to enjoy my baby. I want to, do all these things. But one thing for me personally is formula is not going to be an option. Like it's going to be breastfeeding. We're going to do what we have to do. We're going to make it work. That
Mhm.
90% determination, it's going to get done. And that's not, a shame or, any shade to any moms who do formula feed. But for me, not an option. So we're going to figure it out. We're going to make it work. But there's also, that little bit of faith. Like this is, again, only for, a season. Like, maybe 3 years, maybe two. We'll see.
Mhm.
But yeah, like it's for me, I love breastfeeding. So I'm gonna miss these times, when he's older and he's not breastfeeding anymore. He's running around eating, whatever. I'm gonna miss those times. Like this is my last baby.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep.
I'm gonna miss
Right.
I'm gonna miss that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's for a short time, the pain, the struggle doesn't last, always. And even now, now he'll be actually be 7 months here in a few days. Even now, like we're in a better groove. He's over his 4 to 6 month sleep regression stage. He's sleeping better. I'm sleeping better. Like I have, a little bit more energy. And so even like in that short amount of time, we've come to a place where like I feel better about this whole journey. Regardless of how many times I've done it, how long I've been doing it, there was a struggle, and now it's getting better.
Speaking of alternative feeding and shame, how can we create a culture that affirms all feeding journeys without guilt, without shame, and without comparison?
The thing is to stop the assumptions. Like off the top, there are women who do have issues with breastfeeding, and they do have to transition to formula, or they do have low supply and they have to use formula. But just assuming off the bat, that maybe a mom didn't try, or she didn't want to breastfeed, or she gave up really easily. You have no idea really what's happened there. Just stopping the assumptions. Maybe this is her first child and she's like, yeah, for the next one, I definitely want to breastfeed, encouraging her, to seek out again the education, the support, ahead of time to ensure that maybe that next, journey is more, successful. But yeah, a lot of times there are some issues. And so, those are, things that we have to resort to. But just, being more gentle for sure with moms.
We're already in a vulnerable stage, going
Yes.
from giving birth, the breastfeeding, the milk, the sleep, so everything combined. Words for the mama. What would you say to the mama who's listening right now, maybe in tears, maybe questioning herself, maybe feeling like she's falling apart? What would you want her to know, like right now in this moment of vulnerability?
Yes, what my husband always tells me, "You were literally meant to do this. You were made for this." He tells me all the time. I'm like, I'm tired, or there's like another baby coming. He's like, "You were made to, made for this," and it's like, yeah, you're right. So hearing that, gives me confidence that yes, like I can, continue to do this. This is, what I was created to do, to mother these children, these little crumb snatchers, to nourish them. You grow them, then they you birth them, and then you nourish them, you teach them, you train them up in the way that they should go. And so even with the breastfeeding, this is my duty to give my baby the best, and I'm gonna do that.
Brings me to a good transition, the invisible load: identity, body image, motherhood. We're not just feeding a baby, we're learning to live in a body that doesn't feel like our own sometimes.
Yeah.
The mirror shifts, the pressure builds. We were just talking about that, right? So the bounce back. I think that sometimes, like you said, the comparison that sometimes we get into. How does breastfeeding impact a woman's identity, body image, and sense of self, especially when you're expected to be strong and smile through it?
Yeah, so one thing for sure is you already have this tiny human that's dependent on you for life, to stay alive. And now you add on the dependency of I'm your food source, or you're my food source. That's a lot. And so jokingly, my husband, he called me a cow the other day and I was like, well, yeah, I am. You have to kind of, although I know he's joking. And I would never say that to, somebody else. But you have to see the beauty in it, in, the breastfeeding journey. It can be difficult. It can be a lot, but there is beauty in being able to, to feed your child, and just take care of, their needs. And so, body image, it is hard, especially postpartum, just in general. But I think we need to like shift our mindset away from that being the focus, how we look at and things like that initially. So, there is a point where, you'll want to get back to yourself and, things like that. But initially, that's not even like the focus. The focus is rest and healing and taking care of this new baby and bonding and, learning yourself all over again, because you become a mother to another human. And so every time you have a baby, that's going to start, all over again. This adjustment, period is going to start all over again. And then, that can also depend on your age, how many other children you have, just, the different nuances of life. And so I think there just really has to be a mindset shift away from focusing on body image and more on the natural and the nourishment of this, little human that we've just given birth to.
You bring up a very good point. Rest. What does rest and self care really look like in the feeding journey? In this feeding season, we're still in this critical part of our bodies trying to get back
Yeah.
to normal, back to where
Yeah.
it needs to be.
I think the hardest part for women, because we do so much, we wear so many hats. We're so used to taking care of things that we forget that after you have this baby, people are supposed to take care of you. Like you're supposed to be resting and healing. And you have to turn your brain off to wanting to do everything. Like let people take care of you. Let them assist you. Let them help you, through this journey. You're supposed to be, and I tell moms this a lot, especially like doula clients. You need to find a remote, a book, your Bible, whatever it is, and get prepared to be in the bed and resting and a baby attached to you for a couple of weeks. Like, take that load off. Like,
Mhm.
literally, truly rest. Because once, your 6 to 8 weeks is up, it's go time. Like, it's back to, the hustle and bustle of life. So, why not just take that time to really focus on what's, most important? And that's healing. There is actually more postpartum morbidity and mortality within our communities than it really is like prenatal and during pregnancy. More women are dying between birth and the 1 year mark than anything. And it's because they're not sitting down.
Yes.
They're not
Yes.
resting and they're doing other things. And a lot of times, it can be also related to other health conditions.
Yeah.
But a lot of the issues that we have is because we're not taking the time to sit down and let our bodies really heal
Yeah.
from the journey of pregnancy and birth.
It's a
Yes.
very critical part that we must
Yes.
rest. We were just talking about support. How can our community show up in ways that don't just say we support moms, but how can we actually do it?
The action, yeah, lending a helping hand, making sure, during postpartum, mom has meals taken care of. Maybe you can even come over and help with the children or take the children, somewhere. A lot of it really is the lack of the village. So even in the prenatal stages, plan out these things for postpartum, recovery, the breastfeeding, making sure you have the things that you need, making sure you have, the support systems, that your support system is educated on how all of these things work. It's really, the hands-on and then somebody just kind of being there for you, check in on her. When I text moms, I'm like, "How are you doing?" Like, I know the baby's good. I'm sure the baby's good. Everyone's always concerned about the baby, but it's mom who is falling through the cracks most often. So how are you doing? And then we can talk about the baby. But I need to know that you're okay first because if you're not okay, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to take care of your child. Something is going to, be missed or something, is going to keep you from being the best that you can be. And so I need to know that you're okay in order to know that baby is most likely okay.
As we learn to protect our rest, is having the knowledge, having
Hmm.
the confidence to advocate for our own body. I
Yes.
think that's an important part too of knowing, okay, wait, something is off, not only during pregnancy, but before
Yes.
pregnancy, but even the after.
You know something is wrong, definitely reach out for help or you feel something's wrong, reach out for help. And that's whether it's, related to the pregnancy, postpartum, if it's the breastfeeding, if it's the mental health aspect, we have to be our own advocates because if you're not asking for help, 9 times out of 10 people are not going to know, that you're struggling, especially for, black and brown women. It's that, superwoman syndrome. We're trying to do it all. We're holding in, our true feelings. But how can you, get help if no one knows that you're struggling? So being our own biggest advocates is the best thing that we can do for ourselves.
Let's talk facts because sometimes that's what we do need. We were just talking about, again, the education, the
Hmm.
knowledge. How do we advocate for ourselves? So, can you break down the basics of lactation? How does it work? What is considered normal, and what might be time to reach out for support?
Yeah, so I'm actually doing a breastfeeding class for Black Breastfeeding Week, and so I'll touch on, all those things. But one thing I do want to say is breastfeeding, lactation, milk. Milk is made from the blood, not from the gut. So a lot of women are like, well, what should I be eating, or what can I do to increase my, milk supply, or this or that. It's not in, what you're eating. It's in you latching, your baby. You're moving milk to make milk, as they say. So understanding like how breastfeeding, works, definitely key. You want to ensure that you're removing the milk so your body knows, hey, the milk is, leaving. I need to, replace it. Huge misconceptions and myths and things like that. The number one is that the milk supply is low. Most women do not actually have a low milk supply. It's that they just don't know what normal is and what normal looks like. And that could be half an ounce, all, up to, 4, 5, 6 ounces of milk. But half an ounce is still enough, milk for a certain age, baby. If you're pumping, your pump might not even be, a good enough pump, to help you remove your milk. And so you might actually kind of be working against your body and not seeing, the output that you think you're seeing. But then also trying to compare ourselves to social media. So I literally hate seeing the women on social media with these huge freezer stashes. And in
Yes.
the comments, it's, oh my gosh, how do you pump so much? I wish I had that much. Actually, you really don't. You do not wish you had that much because that woman is attached to that pump.
Mhm.
And that's her daily life is pumping, pumping, pumping. And I'd rather be with my baby, with my family than attached to a pump. I can tell you how many times I have pumped because
Mm.
I loathe it. I hate it. But you cannot compare your journey to somebody on social media. Like it and they're really 9 times out of 10 posting because they want that feedback. They want that engagement. They want that wow factor. They're not telling you how to pump this much. They're not,
Mhm.
going into those types of details. They're just saying, yeah, look at what I can do.
Mhm.
And most women in the comments then feel bad about themselves because they're not doing that same thing when that's not even the norm at all. Yeah, not the norm at all.
It sets up moms for failure because you're
Yes,
giving this false reality of how it's
yes,
supposed to be, but no, that's not how
yeah.
it really is.
It's not the freezer stashes. It's, the bottles, like, I pumped, 6 ounces, 8 ounces. That's not normal either.
Yes.
Like, that's not the norm. Like, for some women, it is, but for
Yes.
most, that's not the norm.
Yep.
So we
Yep.
have to be educated on the
Yeah.
norm and then go from there.
Moms that are having babies for the very first time and not knowing, and that's why the education is very
Mhm.
important. Because I remember when my first baby, I did all the reading, but I think when you're finally going through it, you question,
You
"Am I making enough?" I remember I wanted to quit. I'm like, "I can't do this. Where's the formula?" He's like, "No, no,
yeah,
no, 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 no. You got this."
calm down.
Right? Exactly. Calm down. And I'm glad I stuck with it. Going back to, educating ourselves, being realistic, seeking our support system and community. So
Absolutely.
not every journey unfortunately ends the way we hoped, right? And that hurts, whether it was low supply,
Yeah.
medical complication, mental health struggles, or just not feeling okay. Some others are grieving
Mhm.
and feeding stories that didn't unfold the way they dreamed. How can we create a space for that grief and remind these women that they are still whole, still worthy, and still deeply loved?
I think it goes back to that determination. If you've tried to do everything that you can, then your story can still be successful. I literally tried all the things, and maybe my journey was cut short. But in that time, I did breastfeed my baby, or I did the best that I could. There's that self compassion that we should have. Being more gentle with ourselves, but then also, if you do see a mom, maybe she was breastfeeding, it could have been that she stopped breastfeeding for her mental health. Well, I'm glad that you're taking care of yourself. I have a mom reach out to me and she was like, yeah, I think I'm going to be done with this. And I can't remember exactly how old her baby was, but maybe around like 5 or 6 months. And when we talked, I'm like, well, yeah, you've gone back to work. She owns runs she's a director of a school. Her child comes to work with her. It's a very demanding job. Like, yeah, I would be burnt out as well. Like, if I'm trying to run this whole, business, the baby is right here. You don't really have a break. You have other children, when you get home. I'm like, I totally understand. But your mental health comes first because if you are not okay, you're typically not going to be taking care of the baby the way that you want to, or again, something's gonna, fall through. And it's like, if only, you had taken care of yourself, you could have, potentially avoided this thing. And so mental health first. Take care of your mental health. Do what's best for you. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks. If you gotta go to the formula, then that's where you're going. But yeah, it can be really, really difficult, to balance all of these things and then, still think to yourself, how did I like how did I end up here?
Mhm.
But yeah, if you really been determined and tried all the things, just do in the end what's best for you.
We've been talking about it today too, but how can we begin to open up about conversations about breastfeeding, postpartum struggles, emotional needs to our families?
Yeah, again, communication, talking about it. Like again, even like mental health, it's so taboo in our communities where it's swept under the rug. It's not a thing. We're not talking about it. So it's the same thing with breastfeeding. Let's have these conversations. Let's, keep the conversation open, keep it going. We'll get excited about it. Oh, I learned this thing today. Anything. And then even just our children seeing us, breastfeeding, that starts, a conversation that, puts into their head like, oh, like this is a thing that potentially, like I should do, or, when I get married, that my wife will be doing. The more education, the better. The more conversations, the better. So yeah, just keeping that open, communication, excitement, especially for children. They might not be, helping with giving a bottle, but maybe they're going to get your nursing cover, or maybe they're
Mhm,
going to get the birth cloth, those
mhm.
types of things. Or maybe, again, any type of help that, any way that they can be involved is really good.
That's our village starts right there in our households with our husbands, our children, on how to incorporate them and work together.
Yes. I'm glad you said that. When it comes to like spouses and things, if I'm, breastfeeding, maybe he's, burping or, putting the baby to sleep afterwards. How can we make this, more of a team effort? Because breastfeeding, is not easy. The man is not going to be, breastfeeding, but where can your partner support you? That's a conversation, to have for, you know, when I'm done nursing, sometimes my husband just takes the baby and I'm like, thank you, like, let me have a moment after, this nursing session to, get my energy back up and then, jump back in there. So yeah, whatever you need, ask for it, advocate for it. And if you don't know what you need, try some things out.
Yeah, speak up because how are they going to know if we don't say
Yeah,
anything? Suffering in silence is not helping. It doesn't help.
right.
It
Doesn't
doesn't
help.
help.
It's not healthy. It's not going to help. Many people who care.
Postpartum is very, very crucial. Like you said, that's a crucial part where deaths increase. It is a very
Absolutely.
scary place to be in. Before we wrap up, I want to give you the mic one more time. Is there a
Yeah, yeah,
final
yeah.
message, encouragement, or truth you want to leave in the hearts of our listeners today?
Listen, again, like my husband tells me, you were made to do this. Like you've got it. If you're determined, we're gonna listen. I will help you. We're gonna make it work. Somebody's gonna help you. Ask for help. Reach out. Advocate for yourself. But don't let the stressors of life get you down on top of the breastfeeding. Like, have comfort in knowing that, you were definitely meant for this. There are people out here who want to support, and want to help you. It's just up to you to, advocate for yourself. But in all things, sit down somewhere and rest after you have that baby. Prepare your mind that you're going to be down for a few weeks and then you'll
Mhm.
get right back to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't overdo it. Don't overwork yourself.
If someone is listening and wants to go deeper with your work, where can they find you, follow you, or access
Yeah.
your resources?
Yep. So my website is puasheart.com. So I have information on there for booking a consultation and even, the breastfeeding class that I have coming up. I'm on Instagram, so puas_heart. I don't have, I'm thinking about like TikTok and things like that. So I have a TikTok. I gotta get back in, get into it a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, it's just my website and Instagram. But yeah, I'm trying to branch out a little bit more.
Thank you again for your transparency, your tenderness, and
Yeah.
your truth. I'll definitely have your information down below. To the listeners, if this episode spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Send it to a mama, share it in your group chat, post it on your story, follow and subscribe to never miss a episode. As we close our very first session, I want you to know this is only the beginning. In the weeks ahead, you can look forward to thoughtful conversations and meaningful stories and tools you can carry into every season of your life. Each episode will have a space for truth, for growth, and for grace. So join me next time as we continue to learn, unlearn, and rise together. Until then, take care of yourself. This session may be over, but the journey is just the beginning.